Hello there everyone, welcome to the channel if you're new, welcome back if you aren't, I'm EDJ, and we are continuing with Kings and Generals Caesar series. So last time he was besieged in Alexandria, but despite being besieged by a numerically superior force, he has held his own with his 4,000 men, ensured a good water supply, and I guess he's just gonna hold on until his legions can come and rescue him. Which I guess will be now. So let's do this, guys. Let's just get into this. No more delaying.
Caesar won a decisive victory at Pharsalus, and it looks like he was set to win the Roman civil war shortly. However, events brought him to Alexandria and into a civil war of another country. The last episode saw Caesar besieged by a massive Egyptian force in Alexandria. In this episode, we will see how the Roman can find a way out of his predicament. We're often asked by our viewers what should be their first move to start their own. As time passed, Caesar's situation in Alexandria improved. His lieutenant in Asia Minor, Domitius Calvinus, had received Caesar's request for reinforcements and had responded by dispatching two legions, the 37th by sea and the 35th by land. The 35th was still far from reaching Egypt, but the 37th had now arrived. Strong winds had prevented them pulling into Alexandria's harbour, instead making landfall further down the coast and sending a small boat to inform Caesar of their arrival. Caesar badly needed these men, and so, leaving all his infantry to hold their positions in Alexandria, he left with his fleet and their respective crews to meet the 37th. En route, he dispatched small parties to collect what water they could, but these were attacked by Egyptian cavalry patrols and captured. The Egyptians, thus finding out Caesar's position, manned a number of small vessels with their infantry, hoping to catch Caesar separated from his legions. Caesar was not eager for battle. He needed all his ships for the 37th, and with no infantry or marines on his ships, the Egyptians would have the advantage in boarding. He tried to slip away. A Rhodian ship, however, drifted too far from the formation and was caught by the Egyptians, forcing Caesar to turn to rescue them. Caesar, in his account, is rather damning of these Rhodians for being caught, but also notes that they fought bravely with remarkable seamanship. They were able to buy enough time for the rest of Caesar's fleet to close in. With no heavy infantry to carry out the customary Roman tactic of boarding an enemy, Caesar trusted his crew's seamanship to ram and cripple as many ships as possible while avoiding boarding. The plan worked, and the superior ships of Caesar's fleets were able to sink one ship and capture another. With night closing in, the Egyptians gave up the battle and retreated. Caesar was able to continue to the 37th, adding a much-needed 5,000 men to his numbers, towing their transports into harbour and arriving back in Alexandria the following morning.
Dang.
The Alexandrians were disheartened by this reversal, but Ganymedes was resilient and decided that he needed to rob Caesar of his naval capacity. More than 100 ships had been burnt by Caesar in the harbour, but not all were beyond repair. He ordered the Alexandrians to make repairs on as many ships as possible. The citizens and soldiers of Alexandria committed wholly to the task, even going so far as to pull wood from the buildings of Alexandria to suit their needs. After just a few days, Ganymedes had a fleet of 27 warships and a number of small ships ready for duty and prepared for battle. Caesar was well aware of the importance of naval supremacy, and also began drawing up his fleet, approximately 19 warships and 15 smaller vessels, manning them with infantry from the legions. With Caesar setting off from the royal harbour and Ganymedes from the Eunostos, the two fleets met just off the coast of Pharos Island. Caesar and Ganymedes both drew their fleets into two lines. Between the two fleets,
It's kind of cool to see. Well, I think what this is really showcasing, is Caesar's, naval command. Because so far we've mainly only been covering, his land exploits. But here we're seeing him lead from the sea. And I guess we'll see what he's made of, but I have no doubt that Caesar will prove himself not only great in land, but in sea as well. And heck, if the Romans could fly, he'd probably be a master of air combat too. I feel like Caesar can just do it all, you know?
Were shoals, with a narrow channel being the only path through. Both sides held their position, neither wanting to be caught being the first to pass through this channel. Eventually, the Rhodian commander, Euphranor, a skilled and well-known admiral, offered to break the stalemate. He insisted that he and his men would be able to push through and hold for long enough for Caesar's remaining ships to pass through the channel. Caesar allowed this, sending Euphranor with 4 Rhodian ships through the channel. They quickly passed through and formed a line to receive the Egyptian ships rapidly closing in, delaying long enough for the rest of Caesar's ships to make it through the channel. Caesar was extremely admiring of the Rhodians' skill and bravery, saying that not one ship was boarded or had its oars broken, each time meeting their enemy head-on. With Caesar's fleet now through the channel, he was fully committed. The channel would block any chance of an organized retreat. Caesar would need a win. Caesar had made this clear to his men prior to the battle, stressing that the fate of the Egyptian campaign rested on their soldiers. Though the Alexandrians were renowned sailors, the Romans did have a crucial advantage. The coast and shoals meant there was little room to maneuver, not only negating Ganymedes' numerical advantage, but also preventing his men from capitalizing on their superior seamanship. Instead, the ships were forced into close quarters combat with numerous boarding parties. This was the style of naval warfare the Romans excelled at, effectively making
just like the First Punic War. Yeah, the Carthaginians had the better, I guess, seamanship, but at the end of the day, the moment the Romans closed the gaps, it was done, And yeah, really, it always comes down to, can we board them? And once they board them, it's done.
making a naval battle a land battle, where the superior skill and training of the legions could truly come into its own. By the end of the battle, 2 Egyptian ships had been captured, 3 sunk, and the remnants being forced to retreat back to harbour. Seeking to capitalize on his naval supremacy, Caesar immediately turned his attention to Pharos Island. The island was crucial for controlling access into the harbours and was linked to the mainland by a bridge which connected 2 moles, one extending from the island, one from the mainland. As has already been mentioned, Caesar had already stationed a small garrison on the promenade on the east of the island, and now he saw a chance to completely control Pharos Island, leaving just a few cohorts to hold the now completed defences in the city. Caesar ordered 10 cohorts, approximately 5,000 men, some light infantry and his best Gallic cavalry to their transports to prepare for an amphibious assault. He then ordered them to attack, at the same time attacking the island's garrison with his warships from the west. The fighting on the island was some of the bloodiest so far. The narrow streets and rooftops were ideal for the defenders, while Caesar's men disembarking from the ships were forced to wade through shallow waters and across a beach under constant missile fire. Caesar's tactic of attacking from 2 sides had been effective in splitting the island's defenders, however, and finally the Romans were able to force the Alexandrians to retreat across the mole back to Alexandria. The retreat was not organized, many choosing to jump from the bridge and mole and swim to Alexandria rather than be caught in the bottleneck. Caesar gives the Alexandrian losses as being 6,000 captured and killed. Following this victory, Caesar fortified defences around the bridge controlling access to the Pharos, the Alexandrians garrisoning the bridge linking the mainland city to the mole. This bridge had a large arc through which the Alexandrians could potentially send ships. In order to stop the Egyptians being able to harass his own ships, Caesar would need to control this bridge. The day after taking the island, he first sent ships with artillery and archers to attack the Alexandrian garrison holding the bridge, forcing them to retreat. and then landed himself and 3 cohorts, about 1,500 men, on the mole. These men were then ordered to build a rampart to defend the bridge from the Alexandrian side, while men from the Pharos brought up stones from destroyed buildings to block the arch of the bridge. All seemed to be going well when the Alexandrians suddenly made a huge push from the city to retake the bridge, simultaneously bringing up light ships to try and land some of their own men on the mole. With Caesar on the mole, some of his ships tried to take the initiative themselves, landing marines, slingers and archers. Initially, these missiles were effective at fending off the Alexandrian light ships, but eventually the ships bypassed their position, landing behind them on the mole.
Oh man, this has turned into like a battle of two fronts. I don't know how far they got into building the defenses here. I think I may have missed that, but oh boy. But if anyone can turn this around, it's Julius Caesar.
Lightly armed troops were quickly outfought by the Alexandrians, and panic ensued as they attempted to retreat back to their ships. Caesar and the 3 cohorts were now caught in a pincer. Seeing their allied light infantry in disarray, the cohorts also began to break. Some fought a desperate last stand and were cut down. Many more desperately tried to retreat to their transports. Among these was Caesar. Due to the sheer number and panic, however, many of these transports began to capsize. Thinking fast, Caesar was forced to strip his armor and dive off the boat, swimming to his nearby ships to save his life. The battle had been a disaster for Caesar.
Wow. Wow, Caesar actually kind of lost that little battle on the bridge. Dang, man. Okay, alright, the Alexandrians up to this point were kind of taking L's, but dang, that's kind of like it's a pretty good win right there. Wow.
Though Pharos Island was in Caesar's hands, the bridge was not, and so the Alexandrians could still use the arch to harass his own ships. Moreover, according to Caesar himself, he lost 400 legionnaires and another 400 sailors and marines. Seeking to capitalize on their good fortune, the Alexandrians sent emissaries to Caesar, requesting Ptolemy be returned to them in exchange for an end to the hostilities. Caesar relented and handed the pharaoh over, with the understanding that Ptolemy would then negotiate peace terms. The young king betrayed Caesar, however, and took control of the army, continuing the assaults on Caesar's defenses. The decision to hand over Ptolemy was clearly a mistake.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay, Caesar, that was kind of a mistake. That's like 2. I guess losing the bridge was an L. And this looks like an L, but again, you never know with Julius Caesar, right? We'll see.
In his own account, Caesar relays how his own officers and centurions strongly criticized him for his lack of judgment and trust in the king. Caesar attempts to justify his decision, claiming it was part of a far-sighted strategy which his men did not understand, and that Ptolemy had cried and begged Caesar to let him stay. This seems a clear point where Caesar was using his narrative to try and revise the events and put a positive spin on things.
Yeah, don't worry, I just gave the enemies everything. You see, it's strategy. I've already thought 10 steps ahead, guys. I don't make mistakes. But yeah, I don't know, it seems like a mistake in my opinion. So I guess 2 big mistakes back to back, losing the bridge and just giving up the king. Wow. I just thought Caesar was gonna just completely sweep through this without any like major complications, but that's 2 back to back.
It is far more likely, given Caesar's situation, that he was grasping at straws by letting Ptolemy go, and judging by how much Caesar attempts to mask this, he was well aware that he had made a mistake. Nevertheless, roughly a month later, around the end of February or start of March, Caesar's fortunes began to turn. His allies in Asia Minor had been rallying a force together and marching through Syria and the Levant to Egypt, while supplies were being sent by ship to Caesar. Word of this had already reached the Alexandrians, however, who sent a fleet to intercept the supplies. As soon as Caesar heard of this, he sent his own ships, commanded by Tiberius Nero and Euphranor, to defend his allies' supply.
Oh, hey, yes, Tiberius Nero, the father of future emperor. Wow. Dang, everyone's coming here, huh? That's cool, yeah, it's good to see Tiberius.
Ships. Though the Romans were able to win the battle, Euphranor's ship was surrounded and the Rhodian was killed. The army was also seeing success. The force was around 13,000 strong and commanded by Mithridates of Pergamum, an experienced, talented general and close friend of Caesar. He had now made it to the Nile Delta, having already stormed and seized the strategically important town of Pelusium. An Egyptian force was hastily gathered and sent to attack Mithridates at the river, hoping to either destroy his army or at the very least prevent him from reaching Alexandria and supporting Caesar. Mithridates had been well trained in the Roman style of warfare and successfully fortified his position, holding the Egyptians in check and inflicting heavy casualties as he did so. Messengers were sent to both Caesar and Ptolemy of these events, both learning of them around the same time. Ptolemy knew Mithridates had to be crushed, or else risk Mithridates attacking his force in Alexandria from the rear while they were busy besieging Caesar. Similarly, Caesar was well aware that any hope of victory now rested in Mithridates' army. Both decided to move to the Nile, Ptolemy leaving just the militia in Alexandria and sailing his army down the river, Caesar leaving a light garrison in Alexandria before taking the sea route. Ptolemy had the quicker route and was able to reach the Nile Delta before Caesar, merging with the force already there and taking a strong defensive position on high ground, with their rear protected by the Nile, one flank by rocky high ground and the other flank by marshland. Caesar arrived shortly afterwards, before Ptolemy could launch an attack on Mithridates' position, meeting Mithridates approximately 7 miles away from Ptolemy's camp. In order to reach the king, they would need to ford a small river. Ptolemy sent a force of cavalry and light infantry to this river, hoping to harass Caesar and his allies as they crossed. However, Caesar's Germanic and Gallic cavalry, by now experienced in river crossings, had been sent ahead of Caesar's.
The OP Gallic cavalry has returned. Oh boy. These guys can do miracles. Like, they're about to come and probably thrash this little group right here, so... man.
Main army, crossing the river undetected. Meanwhile, Caesar had his legions cut down trees, placing them across the river as makeshift bridges, and ordered them to charge across. The legions poured across, falling upon the Egyptian light infantry and cavalry. As they did, Caesar's Gallic and Germanic cavalry appeared, charging into the Egyptian flank, routing them almost immediately. Only a few managed to make it to Ptolemy's camp, the rest being cut down by Caesar's cavalry. As was his custom, Caesar encamped close to the enemy, stationing his men at the bottom of the hill, eager to tempt his enemy into battle. With Ptolemy in command of the army, a victory here would put an end to all Egyptian resistance. Caesar had with him the 37th Legion, the remnants of the 6th and 27th, plus the reinforcements brought by Mithridates, roughly 20,000 infantry and another 1,000 cavalry. Ptolemy's force was slightly larger, perhaps 27,000, including the 20,000 veterans who had been at Alexandria and 2,000 cavalry. With Ptolemy's force being larger and holding the better position, Caesar attempted to draw the young king out of position by attacking a nearby hamlet that had been lightly garrisoned by Ptolemy's men. He committed his whole force to this attack, routing the garrison, but Ptolemy did not take the bait. Caesar ordered his men to pursue the fleeing Egyptians up the hill to Ptolemy's position, hoping that the panicked garrison might trigger a mass rout. Ptolemy's men held their positions, however, and Caesar's men now found themselves in a tough uphill battle against an entrenched enemy. Some of his men tried to circle around the Egyptian position, attempting to attack Ptolemy from the rear, but these men were soon peppered by missiles not just from the high ground, but also from Ptolemy's ships on the river. Effectively cut off from the rest of Caesar's force, these men took brutal casualties, having little choice but to try and hide behind their shields. So far,
like I said, I know that Caesar kind of comes here, you know, I know he wins and then sets up Cleopatra, but I always figured it was, like, really quick and, like, you know, without much trouble. But man, Caesar, yeah, he's had some trouble, you know, they've definitely put up some resistance against him. And Ptolemy, you know, at first I thought he was just a dumb kid. I mean, I still think he is. But, so far, at least right here, he's doing alright, you know, for now. But no doubt Caesar's about to wreck him.
Caesar was making little headway, and his men were starting to lose ground. As they were being pushed back, though, the Alexandrians were pushing forward, out of their camp, and slowly moving further off the high ground.
They're giving up their defensive positions, and once they're even, yeah, it's done.
Noticing this crucial error, Caesar sent a detachment of cohorts to skirt around the battle lines to seize Ptolemy's camp. They quickly stormed the defences, overrunning the few Egyptians there, before rushing down the hill to attack Ptolemy's main force in the rear. This move proved decisive, triggering mass panic along Ptolemy's line, which quickly broke. They retreated in chaos to the river, piling onto their ships, many of which capsized in the confusion. Many Egyptians, weighed down by their armour, drowned in the river, among them the young King Ptolemy himself. Wasting no time after this victory, Caesar immediately rode to Alexandria with his cavalry, proclaiming his success and Ptolemy's death. With the king dead, the militia there immediately surrendered. Caesar had won. We do not know how many casualties there were on either side. Caesar's men, who had tried to attack the camp from the Nile side, are said to have taken heavy casualties, and Caesar's force had been forced to fight a difficult battle. Given these circumstances, an approximation of around 1,000 to 2,000 losses for Caesar seems probable, and perhaps as many as 10,000 for the Egyptians. Following the campaign, Caesar embarked on a 3-month-long pleasure cruise with Cleopatra down the Nile, where he, in Appian's words, generally enjoyed himself with her. Soon afterwards, Cleopatra gave birth to a boy, Ptolemy XV, who would later be nicknamed Caesarion. Though Caesar never officially acknowledged Caesarion as being his son, his birth in June 47 BC would align with Cleopatra's first meeting with Caesar at the end of 48 BC. Cleopatra insisted that Caesar was the father, and it is also worth remembering that Cleopatra had spent most of that time besieged in Alexandria, and so did not have access to a large number of suitors.
That Julius Caesar, you are the father. But dang, man, like, yeah, we know Caesarea will become more relevant. But yeah, I like that. Julius Caesar's like, well, my enemies are still here in Africa. I'm gonna just chill out here in Egypt, have this little side adventure, you know, go around, like, cruising and basically being a tourist, and just hanging out with Cleopatra, like, oh, that's kind of hilarious.
Cleopatra agreed to pay the 10 million drachmae debt requested by Caesar, and was named co-ruler with her brother Ptolemy XIV in sibling marriage, naming both friends of Rome. In total, Caesar's escapade in Egypt had taken a full 9 months. Plutarch calls it not necessary, inglorious and full of peril. It is hard to disagree with this assessment. Though Caesar had successfully had the Egyptian debt paid and pro-Roman rulers installed, he had wasted a lot of time and his attention had been badly needed elsewhere. In the 9 months Caesar was in Egypt, Antony, though talented on the battlefield, had proven to be a poor governor. His refusal to cancel outstanding debts was unpopular not only with senators, but also with plebs and veterans.
Yeah, I had heard, and also from the Rome show, that Antony was not good at governing Rome, and it fell apart. Well, it didn't fall apart, but, you know, obviously he wasn't doing good. Caesar's enemies, Pompeian enemies, are still around. So yeah, this whole Egypt thing was a bit... It almost comes across, like I said, like a side adventure, though he did make some pro-Roman allies, so that's something. Then again, by putting Cleopatra there, and then eventually she goes with Mark Antony, it sets a stage for the other civil war in which, like, almost the East was under her and Antony's rule, so I'm almost wondering if this had disastrous consequences. And what would have happened if he just left Egypt alone? It seems like Ptolemy had the upper hand, so... yeah, who knows what the heck would have happened, right? But, I don't know. The great what-ifs of history.
The core of Caesar's supporters. The unrest this caused was so great that Antony had resorted to bringing soldiers into the city of Rome itself in a desperate attempt to contain the situation. Caesar's lieutenant, Quintus Cassius Longinus, who had been left to govern Hispania Ulteria, had been equally disastrous. His tyrannical governance of the province had even led to a short-lived pro-Optimate rebellion. Furthermore, some of his men had rebelled and proclaimed Marcellus as the new praetor instead. The province of Illyricum had also been stirred to revolt by Marcus Octavius, who was constantly assaulting towns in the area. In Asia Minor, Pharnaces II of Pontus, another son of Mithridates VI, had taken advantage of the chaos caused by the civil war, attacking a number of Roman allies. Meanwhile, throughout the last 9 months, Cato, Scipio, the sons of Pompey and Labienus, had been consolidating their strength in North Africa, amassing a vast army. Caesar had entered Alexandria as dictator and effectively master of the Roman world, save for a rebellious faction in North Africa. He was now leaving with dissent, war and rebellion in North Africa, Spain, Italy, Illyricum and Asia Minor. Leaving 3 legions in Egypt, the 27th, 37th and newly finally arrived 35th, Caesar took the remains of the veteran 6th and marched for Asia Minor through Syria. There are still many battles to be fought before his victory could be considered complete, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button.
And so yes, that ends his Egyptian battles, and now he's gonna have to salvage the mess. So yeah, Julius Caesar takes his eye off what's going on for a bit there, and then everything just goes to, you know, everything falls apart. Now Caesar has to come and clean it up. So yeah, we'll see how he cleans it up in the next video. Bye everyone.